Welcome back to the Teacher's AI Cafe. I'm Kane, a teacher and a parent who wants AI to give us back our time. I share practical classroom-tested AI strategies to cut down your workload, improve your feedback and reduce stress so you can get your evenings back and be more present with your friends and family. No jargon, just actionable steps. Grab your mug. Now let's get going. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. What I've been reading during the week is an article actually that had been released by the OECD. It's called the OECD Digital Education Outlook for 2026. And obviously a big part of it was actually AI. And I guess I tend to give more weight for the OECD. They tend to do really good reports. More than other reports that have come out, they got my interest. And it's not full of shiny promises about artificial intelligence or digital transformation. I guess because it quietly described a future that already feels very familiar to us in many classrooms already, depending where you are in the world. So for many schools, every student has a device. Now, a device may be a computer or it might be a mobile phone. And to me, a mobile phone for a lot of kids is their computer nowadays. Dashboards that track engagement of some description, AI tools offering instant feedback, platforms making decisions about pacing, sequencing, and assessment. We even have those in our machine learning assessments that we do. Those standardized assessments here in Australia. NAPLAN will actually adjust the sort of questions you get based on your early answers. So none of that is speculative anymore. It's actually here. It's already happening. I guess what sort of grabbed my attention was not the technology itself. It was the question that the reports keep circling around without addressing it directly, which I don't know why they did that. Who is actually in control of teaching now? And this has been a debate in lots of different areas. So when people talk about reports like this, they often assume it's written for teachers. In this case, no, OECD actually writes for things like government systems and policymakers, high-level people in organisation. That matters because it shapes the tone of the warning that they're getting, not at individual classrooms. This is not a celebration of digital education. It's more closer to a risk assessment. And there's been a lot of discussion around that. The report essentially saying that technology is moving fast and the education system can think about it. If schools do not actively shape how digital tools and AI are used, these tools will end up reshaping schooling by default. So basically, we have the control of the schools, and that's not good. So for a classroom teacher, that's important because we can shape things in our individual classrooms, but at the same time, we are controlled by our principal in our school, our leadership, and then they're controlled by what actually comes down from regional directors, districts, like you've read in the US. In our schools in Australia, principals do have a lot of autonomy, which is fantastic. But at the same time, depending on your principal, some may embrace it, some may not. That's where we go. So there are parts of the reports that sound familiar and reasonable, I guess, quite frankly, very reasonable. It talks about personalised learning, about AI helping adjust difficulty levels, and that's a fantastic thing. It talks about faster feedback, especially for formative assessments. And it talks about reducing teacher workload, particularly administrative work that eats into planning and reflection time. None of this is controversial, and it's often where a lot of the argument, even myself, will talk about AI. And most teachers, this will actually be generally welcomes the type of support they actually want for themselves personally. But the OECD keeps inserting an important condition. Technology should support teaching, not replace professional judgment. And this line appears again and is more, and I guess it's doing more work than it first might appear to the average person. And I've always argued in all my episodes that the teacher's knowledge and experience is the core of any technology we use. In case of this podcast, it's AI. So the report comes a bit more serious and starts listing what education systems tend to underestimate. One is data, and data is a big thing. It's a massive thing in Australia, about personal data of students. So students collect so much data. We obviously always collect all the educational data. We now put it in a digital form. We also now collect a lot of personal medical data on our students, so we can obviously cater for them. And this is probably more data than a lot of parents and even teachers realise. Behaviour data, engagement, usage patterns. It's often invisible, but sitting there behind our systems and our platforms. And we upload it because it's easy to use. We can obviously put together all different data sets to make something useful to us. The other thing is bias. Now, AI systems learns from using existing data, so things that are already aligned is biased upon. So some would say might be Western bias. As a Westerner in Australia, I don't have an issue with that. Some people in other parts of the world may have an issue with that in the information it gives back. which means they can reproduce the same inequities that I guess some people claim education exists within it that challenges different groups in our society. So that's something we really need to stop and think about what we're doing. And that is actually the idea of de-skilling. And we've talked about this previously. I've talked about things like cognitive offloading. I was talking to my students about it this week. And in some ways, it's a very good thing to cognitive offload certain tasks. But at the same time, if we develop our skills, we have to offload everything, and we actually won't know what that means. A bit like putting the answer into the calculator, and that does all the calculations, and you don't actually know how it works out the final answer, which I think my maths teacher still gets you to do it manually first as a process. So in terms of de-skilling, the report raises the risk that when systems start suggesting lessons, sequencing content, generating feedback automatically, teachers can slowly lose opportunities to practice the very judgment that defines good teaching. If you're aware and you're intentional of how you use AI, and with the lens that it's helping what you want to do and achieve, you do obviously circumvent that. But if you just blindly go, make me a lesson on this, yes, you're going to fall in this trap over time. And it may lead to cognitive laziness in some teachers that they exist in every organisation, not really thinking about what it's producing and just using it with the students. But at the same time, that's the thing to happen. I used to work in a school where I put in a system. We had a tray in the staff room, and this was my initiative. We would put all our worksheets and resources in there for topics, and then other teachers can use it. It was an easy way to share. They could grab it, photocopy, and use it with their classrooms, or come and see you about it if you need to. And I thought it was brilliant. And then my head of department took it away because one particular teacher, he developed a problem because this teacher never did any planning. He literally just walked in, looked in the tray, grabbed that, and that's what he taught that day. And because of that, initiative was put aside to that staff member left. But like I said, AI can do this exactly the same thing. It doesn't solve the problem with those teachers, and that's where the human relationships and management and direction within by our heads of department alike, well, we need there to address that. I guess one of the strongest parts of the report, getting back to the report, has been, one wish there was more headlines focused on the insistence that teachers remain central. And this does get lost in a lot of reporting. The OECD is blunter in the reporting. The system invests in devices and platforms, but not in teacher capacity. Digital education would fail. And that's within any system. It needs to be implemented. And I got a good podcast coming up with a teacher called David, talking about how they're implementing it and the process they're actually going through on a school-wide system. So it won't happen immediately, it will not happen dramatically, but it will happen quietly over time. So the report criticises professional learning that focuses on how to click through tools. Instead, it argues that teachers need time, support to think about the deeper questions, to really engage and learn with the tools that are actually provided. So when should AI be used and when should it not? How do we question outputs rather than just accept them? And how do we align these tools with curriculum assessment rather than letting platforms drive learning by default by just accepting what putting in there? A bit like hopping on the internet, putting in a lesson ideas, something comes up on Google, download the PDF and use it. We don't want to have that approach. So reading this, I guess I could not think about how often professional development is rushed, is fragmented, and I guess reduced to some, even when it is on IT platforms, featured demonstrations, not really getting into nitty-gritty because time is limited, because so much of our time is obviously put into the classroom. And very little time, though there are a lot of reports and arguments reducing the amount of teaching loads that teachers have to allow that preparation and that better discussion, professional development, say, just as other professions have, that we don't seem to be able to get into the education system. And one, I think it's just based around money, simply because they can't hire enough teachers. If we reduce everyone's loads, to fill in the gaps there. Same with the idea of, I guess, different educational strategies to free up time for teachers. If we haven't got enough teachers because we can't afford to pay them, then that's a problem. What was the idea? Yeah, small classrooms, but you need more teachers. In the report, there's a strong focus on governance, which is not something teachers usually invited to discuss around. It's usually done at higher levels. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. Sometimes I think they could do with input from teachers. They really need a system where you can do submissions when the department's coming up with policy and ideas. But governance around who owns the student data, but obviously it should be schools, who's accountable when systems make errors, who decides what values are embedded into digital platforms. And here in Australia, we're quite strict, particularly around data. in terms of the platforms we use, the organisations, say our schools, Microsoft, data centres here in Australia, and all those sort of legal requirements that we have and around our privacy laws. But obviously this is not universal. The OECD warns that trust in education systems is fragile. If students or parents feel monitored rather than supported, then trust erodes quickly. You hear about scandals about data. Ethics, the report argues, cannot be an optional extra. It has to be built into procurement decisions, policies, and classroom practices, and that depends on the laws of the different countries. Like I said, in Australia, we've got the Privacy Act, which is the basis of how we handle all digital data and personal information. Its retention, protection, as well as its disposal. So it's a big ask, and I guess teachers need to be part of the conversation because they've got to be aware of what information they're importing into the system. So where does it leave us at the classroom level? I guess for me, it got me thinking about a few things which I'd already agree with anyway. So digital literacy is no longer about using tools. It never has been for me. But it's about understanding how algorithms shape learning experiences. Questioning AI outputs is not skepticism. It's actually your professionalism as a teacher. More importantly, pedagogy has to lead the technology, not chase it. So when I'm using AI, I've already got in my mind how I've structured the lesson, the resources I need. I'm using AI to find resources and generate it far more quickly than I'm doing if it's brand new or I don't have the sort of resources I need straight away. Importantly, the report never says the teachers are the problem. If anything, it suggests the opposite, that a strong teacher's voice, education. So I'll start that again. Without a strong teacher voice, education risks drifting into systems shaped more by the vendors, the companies, than by values. And there's these arguments being going on even before AI came along of IT systems forcing their ideas and their platforms onto us. Some are great. So, for example, I love using Swift Playgrounds to teach coding. I think it's brilliant. But that was Apple's version of, and they pushed it out through their platform. If you're at an Apple school, this is what they're providing for us. So some teachers just went with it. If it was a terrible platform, some people might still use it because that's what their vendor is supplying to them. So we don't want that situation. Some ideas that come out of the report, really, if you start reflecting on it, is the question is not whether AI digital systems belong in the classroom, because they already do, and they're here. The real question is whether teachers will help design how they're used, or whether they will be handed finished systems and asked to adapt after the fact. And this can happen a lot, especially with, say, wrapper type systems that you can get into, which are popular because they've got a very low entry to start using them. So I suggest go have a read the OECD Digital Education Outlook for 2026. And I guess the message is telling teachers not to fear the technology, to actually embrace and take control of it. At the same time as it's telling us to stay awake and be aware of what's happening, be aware of the very rapid changes. If you listen to my Monday tech updates, you hear these changes every week, how it's evolving and changing and getting more embedded in what we do in the education system. Because the future of education is being built right now, and AI is going to have a very big role in it. And we've got to make sure that we actually take control of that. So whether it's within your school and how your school implements it, or whether you've got a choice in terms of high-level thinking and leadership or a district level, definitely put teachers at the centre and the teacher's voice and how they use it. So until next time, keep up the good work. My next Wednesday episode will have a teacher interview, which is absolutely fantastic. It was a really good one. Very long episode with lots of different ideas and conversation coming out of it on AI in the school system. So until then, keep up the good work. I'll talk to you soon.